Much, Adewale. Thanks, Victor. Good morning, Nigeria.
We have also been joined on the program by Niyi Akinshiju, Chairman, Independent Media Policy Initiative. He's also a financial and investment analyst. A pleasure to welcome you, Niyi Akinshiju.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
In Nigeria.
Okay, you're welcome, sir. Now, let's kickstart with Professor of Capital Market, Professor Uche Walike. You know, before the meeting on Monday, it's like the capital market expectedly went on red, and it was expected, right, that it will happen. So, do you see the outcomes of this MPC meeting changing the narratives in the market?
Yeah, I want to borrow your word, expectedly. You noticed that on Monday the stock market dipped. We also saw that bearish sentiment prevailing on Tuesday. So I would say, traders, investors, anticipated, predicted that the MPC would raise rates. And usually what happens is that when you have increase in interest rates, you find investors, migrating from stocks to fixed income securities, okay, because of higher interest rates. So that's one implication of that on the market, because the monetary policy is said to have some channels, one of which is the asset channel. That's the stock market channel. Apart from the interest rate channel, the credit channel, the exchange rate channel, another channel is the stock market. So anytime you have a decision, MPC takes a decision, it tends to also reflect, in stock market performance. That's why, one is also, one would advise that in taking decisions to do with interest rates, the entire, if you like, balance of risks, should be put on the table. So it shouldn't just be for purpose of, for the single purpose of, if you like, reining inflation, which of course is the mandate of the central bank. But there are other considerations too that must be made, including how it's likely to impact growth. Okay, because there's an inverse relationship between high interest rates and GDP growth rates. The higher the interest rates in an economy, you should expect that access to credit will be constrained, cost of funds will be high, and that would impact firms, impact jobs, okay, and also impact GDP growth.
Yeah, but if you notice, if you recall it, that in February when the MPC had their first meeting this year, the interest rate was raised by 400 points.
Yes.
That is to 22.75.
Yes.
Would you say that it really had a positive impact on the economy or would you have advised that they should have allowed it to probably rain for about 6 months before another increase?
Well, not necessarily 6 months, but if I were a member of the MPC at the meeting of Monday and Tuesday, okay, I would have voted to hold the rates. And that's because, just as you rightly pointed out, in February, the rates were raised, MPR was raised to an unprecedented level of 22.75, okay, from 18.75 by 400 basis points,
by 400
unprecedented.
Basis points. Yes.
And MPC didn't just stop at that. MPC also increased the cash reserve requirement, okay, also widened the asymmetric corridor, +1 -7. Okay, it used to be +1 -3, but what have they done now? They have also reversed that, brought back that corridor to +1, -3. So having done that, of course, I reflecting on what happened in February, one would tend to understand why they did that in February, even though at some point I also thought it was, high. MPC didn't meet in September last year, they didn't meet in November. So in order to play catch up, they needed to make that bold move, all right? But having made that bold move in February, and considering that it's just a few days after that first move, so my expectation was that they would at least observe the impact of that, on the economy before adjusting these rates once again. You know, they have another meeting in May. So May would have been, you know, a good opportunity to, by that time, the lag effects, you know, one would have seen the impact, you know, for a review, not coming, you know, too close. Because if you look at it cumulatively now, MPC has increased MPR by 600 basis points just in 1 month. Okay, they retained the cash reserve requirement for commercial banks.
Is it 1 month or 2 months?
Yes, they did that in February now.
Okay,
and this is just
March.
Yeah, this is March.
Okay,
yes,
that's early February actually.
No, late February 20, usually 20 some 24, 25, about the same time.
The 6 weeks.
Yes, interval. So you now find that the cash reserve requirement for commercial banks, you know, 45 retained, but they also adjusted that of the merchant banks. The merchant banks CRR was 10%. That increased it to, you know, 14%. Okay, and then you see, all of that, you know, ultimately, okay, the whole idea is to constrain credit. Now, I also see let me also say this. Inflation, yes, I agree, is inimical to growth. I also see the point from where central bank is coming. They say, for example, that you know, inflation has remained stubborn, elevated. That's 1.7%. They also say that it's also, look at the exchange rates. Okay, high the money supply, volume of money in the circulation is also affecting exchange. So you're looking at inflation, you're looking at exchange rate, and they're also looking at the real interest rate in the economy. They say it's still negative, so they want to put it in such a way that it will attract investors. Okay, but that is one consideration. I'm saying another consideration should also be, when you do all that, you should also have regard to its impact on economic activities generally, because this is one economy. Ultimately, okay, you are after macroeconomic stability. And what are those macroeconomic goals? It's not just low and stable inflation, but you're also talking about sustainable, inclusive growth. So if you're making a policy that will hurt growth, okay, so I don't think that is that's too ideal. So my expectation, as I said, would have been to hold, and it's not as if I'm against tightening. Okay, I'm not against tightening monetary policy at this time, given the volume of money out there, the ways and means, you know, that are still out. Okay, I'm not against tightening. What I'm promoting, or what I'm recommending or suggesting, is that if you must tighten, okay, you must approach it in a measured way, okay, possibly in an incremental fashion that does not ultimately distort, you know, economic activities.
Okay, the growth of the economy. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Waleke, for your opening salvo. Let's get to Niyi Akinshiju. The last time, well, I can still recall the positions that we are taking either side, but successive increase of monetary policy rate interest has not gone down well with some analysts who think that it could worsen the economy. What say you at this time? Of course, having to cast your mind back to the last 1 month, how much has that benefited the economy that you have to raise again?
I think we also have to we have to look at it from the balancing act, as Prof noted, between inflation and, of course, growth. Since February 27th, the last MPR, inflation rate had moved from 29.9 to 31.7, and that translates to mean that the MPR that was announced in February might not have addressed the concern, the inflationary concern of that MPC at that particular time. And now you have seen that moved. The major concern for the CBN, as of course analyzed, had been the fact of price increase, which is leading to erosion of purchasing power, one. Two, substantial increments in foreign exchange rates, virtually at a point in time, virtually every 24 hours. And three, the reluctance of foreign investors to come into the economy, principally again because of negative interest rates, negative returns on investment. And negative returns on investment is tied, to between the MPR and inflation rates. So there are apparent options. What will be the option? Okay, let us increase rates at this time. It's a trade-off. And like the governor of the central bank noted, this is to be a short-term, affair. It's by maximum the end of the year. It is expected that inflation rate would have reduced, would have declined, and would have been a good reason, to reduce, of course, the NPR. Because again, for me, would we rather that we have price instability, constant price increment, erosion of purchasing power, and on the other hand, we have production ongoing, but purchasing power is not enough to even acquire products or services. So where your 100,000 real value of your 100,000 naira in January, by March or April, would the real value has fallen to 70,000, and it cannot now purchase even those products that are being produced through more access to credits and all that. So I think for me it's basic to first address one. The Yorubas will say when a tree falls on a tree, it is the one on the top that you first remove. The major concern for perhaps 90% of Nigerians at this time is they go to the market and they realize that prices are up. Either price of food or basic amenities and all that. So I am a strong how do I call it, promoter, no, protagonist, better,
advocate,
protagonist of increased NPR. And I was even thinking actually that this may be the realization of the real NPR that was the intent of the CBN governor, especially in the February meeting.
Okay.
Yes, it's because from what innuendos now that we gathered post that meeting, the governor and a number of members of the MPC were actually rooting for 6%. So perhaps it was out of moderation that they agreed on 4%, but some weeks after, the inflation rate had gone up. But again,
so will increasing it make it better?
Yes. Inflation, NPR was increased to a historical high, truly, of 22.75 in February.
Yes.
Since then, we have seen a turnaround, more or less, in the forex markets, in foreign exchange rates. And of course, we all agree that foreign exchange rate has a strong pass-through effect, on domestic prices. And by now, some Nigerians have started, profiling prices that are dropping, as a result of the fall in exchange rate. In January, I think second week January or so, exchange rate went as high as 1,900 to $1 in the black market.
Almost 2,000.
Yes. It is now at 1,380 as at yesterday in the official market. Now, what that tells me is that rate that was announced at that time, had effect. Now we have more inflow. We have recorded more inflow, increased inflow. In February alone, 2.3 billion. While in the whole of 2023, we inflow in terms of remittances, that is diaspora remittances, and the foreign investment inflow was just about 3.9 billion. So, and in 29 days, we were able to generate 2.3 billion of scarce, which was a scarce resources at that point in time. So it does mean that a policy had been streamed, and it's having effect. So we cannot talk about the ineffectuality of the NPR rate, as it were, in February. So we believe that perhaps with this additional increase, one, if the policy had been...
What he's saying is that it is not totally adverse to the increase in the policy, but it should have been given more time before another increase is announced?
You know, it cuts again where you see trouble. You do not also tolerate it. It's from far that you know the potency of a crisis. So if you have the capacity to address that crisis in the immediate, it is better than for it to linger and of course become a storm, you know. So I think one, we have seen and we are experiencing the positive outturn of the last NPR, you know. We have seen about $1 billion came into the country in February through FDIs, you know, that we were not expecting. But it was like an immediate thing. You saw more inflow into the fixed income securities. You even saw more inflow after the first 3 or 4 days negative reaction in the equity market. The equity market even rebounded because some foreign investors also came in, foreign portfolio investors also came in, you know. So if you have that kind of effect, and you now see the movement of the inflation figures moving up again, it becomes a concern. So how do we address this inflation rate that it should not get out of control again? One, we need to sustain the interest of foreign investors as it has been triggered. They stayed away for close to 3 years in this country. Remittances, the diaspora remittances was as low as 600 or something million
but
in 2023.
But the interest of the foreign investors to affect our own economic growth, how positive is that?
It should affect us. We should be congratulating ourselves now that while we had a burdensome concern over forex rates, that was also impacting our goods and services, in the last few months. Now we can start breathing a sigh of relief, because this will also reflect even in our basic products, petroleum, PMS. There are calculations now that PMS will likely fall below 560, per liter from the 680 that it is now. That's because true. It is also calculated on foreign exchange rates. So it's the foreign exchange rate is a major contributor to price templates across all sectors, across all consumption sectors. So if this rate, and it's yet to be proven otherwise, that it is not it is not this rate that is impacting the foreign exchange rate decline that we are seeing. Forex is a major contributor to Nigeria's development. And as long as there is access to it at predictable and stable price, for the first time in about 8 months now, we can say, okay, in the last 3 weeks, we've had a more stable, more moderate movement in the foreign exchange segment of the market. Yes, price had continued to increase, but again, this may also be a strong application, a strong policy deployment to address concerns over inflationary rates.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Akishiju, for your thoughts there. You have listened to his argument, and I know you are itching to react to some of his comments.
Yes.
Okay, what are your reactions?
Well, I agree with him. The exchange rate pass-through has an impact on inflation, no doubt about that. But let me also add that people often attribute the moderation we now have in the exchange rate. They attribute it solely to that the jumbo hike in MPR that we had in February. But I don't think that is correct. You see, the confidence we have in the market now is largely on account of the fact that the central bank has, to a large extent, succeeded in clearing backlogs. Okay? We also know that the central bank has also improved the liquidity in that market, by resuming sales to qualified BDCs. Okay? Since the resumption of sales to BDCs, it has gone a long way to improve liquidity in that place. And the central bank remember the clampdown on Binance, okay, has also helped, because that has also had the effect of taking out, a substantial part of speculative activity in the forex market. So all of these have contributed to, achieve the stability we have now, in the forex market. And why was the central bank able to begin intervention in the market because of the accretion to, external reserves, that we're experiencing now. Accretion to external reserves coming not only because of we are beginning to see foreign portfolio investors, but because of the fact that if you also check crude oil output, okay, forex sales, crude oil sales, has also improved. Crude oil output has improved from 1.45 million barrels per day to 1.65 million barrels per day.
So
if you check, yes, we now have more. So there's accretion to reserves, and if you also look at oil price, fortunately for us, oil price too, has been favorable. The last time I checked, $87, per barrel. The budget is on $77.9, dollars per barrel. Okay, so with favorable crude oil price, with improvement in crude oil output, on account of reduction in crude oil theft, okay, we have seen accretion to reserves. And remember too that in the last couple of months, the government too, CBN and the government have also succeeded in getting some funds by way of loans from Afrexim Bank, from World Bank. All of these have helped to boost the country's external reserves. So armed with this now, the central bank has been in the position to intervene. That's why you now find the central bank intervening in the market, as opposed to their previous stance of saying they will float, they won't allow market forces. So today the central bank is intervening, and that's good. So I want to commend.
So that's brought stability.
Okay. So I want to commend the central bank, for those. So it's not as though it's because they raised MPR by 400, but that's why we're seeing all the stability that we have in the market today. I just want to put that context and correct that impression. Yes, I agree. FPIs must have come in, but that has not really accounted for the stability that we have there today. Speculative demand has to a large extent, been curtailed. And as I said, that's also because of the confidence that the central bank has, kind of achieved in the market today. That $7 billion backlog, clearing the 7 billion, at least the valid ones we understand, has gone a long way to, instill confidence. So that's about the exchange rate. So I agree, again, exchange rate pass-through has an impact on a general price level. But that's not the entire story.
Okay.
If you read that communique, this is the communique by the one read by the governor, okay, it also identifies the other factors driving inflation in Nigeria. Okay, it talked about insecurity. In fact, it states
food
there. Yes, it said that addressing food insecurity. Okay, addressing food insecurity and supply, shortages, was key to containing inflation, inflationary pressure. I'm trying to see if I can even regurgitate it verbatim. Okay, that's what is there. And further, somewhere again in the communique, you also see them now identifying the factors one after the other. They mentioned rising energy prices. They mentioned high cost of transport, logistics. Okay, you also find the insecurity, of course, that is stopping farmers from going to farms. And then they also mentioned legacy infrastructure deficit. So when you look at these factors, these are not factors that are within the purview of the central bank. It is a fiscal side that should be addressing insecurity, addressing legacy infrastructure deficit, addressing rising energy costs. It's not the central bank. Okay, and that's why I think that over-reliance on the MPR, okay, may be counterproductive. And I will also tell you why I think so. Remember, one of the factors is rising energy costs. Okay, now you raise MPR by a very wide, in percentage points. But as we have seen now, 600 basis points just within a space of 1 month.
1 month.
Okay. Now I teach an MBA class. I also teach, a DBA class. Now in that class we find entrepreneurs, and these entrepreneurs in the course of your lecture will tell you their experiences since the rates were jacked up. Yes, it has affected, negatively impacted what they do. Okay, now you also find the case of, again, I was having a chat with somebody who imports.
But from what he said, sorry to cut you,
yes,
but from what he said these measures taken is likely to boost the purchasing power of Nigerians.
Yes, so and I'm trying to tell you that if care is not taken, you end up reinforcing the cost push side of inflation. What the central bank is trying to address is the demand pull side. Okay, monetary policy is all about reducing volume of, either you're reducing or you're increasing is money, money in circulate, volume of money supply. Okay, so they say money supply is high, and that's why you find a lot of money chasing
Few
goods and also chasing forex.
Okay.
So they want to mop up. All right, so that's on the part of monetary factor. But these other non-monetary factors, which I mentioned, central bank has no control over insecurity. Has no control over
food,
rising energy, like petroleum, for example. That is the concern. I'm telling you that when you raise MPR, when you raise interest rates, okay, again, it's a practical case. Somebody that imports AGO and DPK. AGO is diesel, okay, DPK is kerosene. Okay, these things are imported. So my friend who does that, was telling me that as soon as the MPC, jacked up interest, what usually happens are the banks will also raise the cost of, because what the importation they do is bank financed. They don't do that with their money. They borrow money, they open lines of credit. Okay, so the cost of opening line of credit will automatically increase. And when this diesel comes in, okay, according to him, he says the central bank can increase to whatever, they can raise the MPR. As for them, they will simply pass it on to the consumer. So the cost of diesel is bound to increase. The cost of any imported product now will go up, okay, because of the fact that they are using bank loans, to be able to do that.
Okay.
And I've also talked about, so when you have diesel costs going up, for example, you can see diesel is a major energy source for firms in Nigeria. So you find the cost of production going up. What have you done in the end? You want to contain inflation, but your policy is indirectly also reinforcing the cost push side of inflation. So cost of production is also going up because access to credit is constrained. People are borrowing at a higher cost to do business. If you borrow at a higher cost to do business, the natural thing will be for you to, of course, transfer it into your products, especially if you are producing essential commodities. It's only when you're doing luxury items that you may not succeed. But if there is essential, you simply heap the increase on the consumer. So again, you find prices going up. So I am positive about this economy. I want to see the central bank succeed in driving down inflation to 21.4%, which is their target. But I'm saying that the strategy...
I was going to ask that. Do you think actually that the inflation rate can be dragged from the 31% to 21% by December this year?
The only way it can happen is if they, in fact, even achieve a target that is better than that, lower than that.
Okay.
Yes, is if the two sides, monetary authority and the fiscal authorities, talk to each other to work on both ends. Okay, the fiscal authority has its own role to play as far as inflation is concerned. So we shouldn't think that containing inflation is just the responsibility of the central bank. No, it's because of the nature of the factors driving inflation in Nigeria. That's why the fiscal authority must also be involved. It's not just about the monetary authority. Okay, look at this exchange rate. He also mentioned part of also why we're having the pressure in the forex market is also because of the the rising FAC proceeds. The Federation Accounts Allocation Committee proceeds. Each time they share, the last month it was 1.something trillion. So for some time now it's been over trillion. So once they share this money, okay, and you find the much of it again coming to chess forex, because state governments too have also done their budget. Some of the budget they have done have some dollar denominated components. So they have to, the fiscal side also has to find a way of applying in a more productive manner the increase that they are getting now from FAC. So when the two work together, that's the time we can achieve that. But to think that the central bank alone will be able to achieve that just by focusing on the money supply. At the end of the day, you end up hurting the economy, because come to think of it, assuming you take out all the funds, there is no money. Again, companies produce, for example, assuming within companies produce, you end up having a inventory. Okay, unsold stocks will be there, capacity utilization will drop, jobs will be affected, so the economy too will be affected. And that's also why I will advise the central bank. There is need for central bank to work closely with the monetary authorities. I don't see why the central bank should have a growth target that is different from that of the government. Why do I say so? If you check that communique, the central bank in that communique, says it is forecasting that the economy will grow by 3.38% in 2024. That's what is in the communique. Okay, but if you check the government side, in the 2024 budget, government is projecting 3.76%. So if government is projecting 3.76%, the central bank is projecting 3.38%, the same economy. You can see that.
So you're calling for a collaboration between the government.
Yes, there should be one. As far as GDP growth is concerned, there should be one target. Who is giving us that target? If the central bank has the expertise and is the best position to do it, let the central bank produce the target that the two of them can work towards. So the government shouldn't have a target that is different from that of the central bank. In the past we used to have inflation rates. Federal Minister of Finance will have inflation rates. Central bank will have inflation rate. But of course now all of them use inflation rate coming from the National Bureau of Statistics. So I'm saying this data must be one, because that enables synergy. Okay, that also helps them to work, not to work at cross purposes. Because if CBN has something lower, it means it's working to also achieve that. When the government has a higher target, okay, and that's also why you will find the central bank trying to do what it is doing, because it knows that what it is doing is also affecting growth. Okay, so what I'm saying ultimately is that I want to commend the central bank for what they have done, particularly with respect to exchange rate. Yes, but in terms of driving down inflation rate, my advice is that the central bank has other tools at its disposal. It's not just the MPR. Okay, they should have an optimal mix of their policy to deploy optimal mix of their policy toolkit. Use other tools too to tighten. As I said, I'm in support of tightening. Okay, but how to go about it is very important. So that other things in the economy are not adversely affected. Yes.
Okay. Going about it is very vital.
I just want to ask Niyi. He's been smiling. I'm not sure if that smile is in agreement with what Prof is saying or in disagreement. But do you think Prof is apt in saying that both sides need to work together in unison to be able to achieve the desired result? And while you're at it, maybe you also consider how does this whole increase in NPR and all of that affect the manufacturing sector and other debtors of commercial banks?
Negatively, but we'll come back to collaboration. Collaboration is assumed, is given, and from the last I had, we have representation of the fiscal side, that's the government, on the board, on the MPC of the CBN. So, which means it is not a fenced or walled-off affair. It's the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance is a member of the MPC, as it were. In fact, you also have some permanent secretaries in government who are also board members of the CBN. So I think there is a collaboration, and it has to be a conscious thing anyway, given the peculiar nature of the Nigerian financial and investment environment. Because, yes, I agree, the CBN cannot be responsible alone for inflationary rates, movements. But the CBN has a mandate for stabilizing prices, and prices are manifested in inflationary rates. So if that is the mandate of the CBN, it will be a dilution of the duty of the CBN to look away. So if the MPR movement is the policy, inclusive of other auxiliary policies, just as I noted, you have a suite of policies that the CBN had deployed over the last so many weeks, since January effectively, January 28th effectively, that are now reflecting on the forex price movement in the country. So my own argument is allow CBN to do its own. Motivate, incentivize, if it's to harass the fiscal side, to do its own. And we know that the fiscal side is also doing its own. Just 2 days ago, we started talking about the Renewable Hope Infrastructural Development Fund. So it talks to the fact that there's a commitment to have a specialized fund to provide and facilitate legacy infrastructure. The CBN itself acknowledged what the fiscal side is doing in terms of agriculture, you know, either at the level of dry season agriculture, and I mean, most of us saw what they did in Jigawa and other states in the north and all that, and the effort, you know, to boost food production in the country. Yes, it should be a concern because food inflation is as high as 37.8 or thereabout. And it's actually the major driver of the Nigerian inflationary figures. So to that extent, that is in the purview of the fiscal side. And the CBN had also come out to say, unlike before, we are not going to intervene in this thing because we don't have the kind of expertise to deliver on such. So it's the fiscal side that will do it, and we are reading, we are hearing, and we are seeing what the fiscal side is doing. I don't think one should wait for the other. If the MPR will have its own effect as it is being managed, and the fiscal side is also coming up with its own policies and implementation threshold, it will get to a time there will be a balance. But the important thing as of now is that if the MPR is what at the level of the CBN would impact pricing, you know, and of course save purchasing power possibilities, you know. I think I stand by that because last year, for instance, about the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, we want to come to that. Manufacturers Association of Nigeria said inventory, the value of inventory was up to 350 billion naira. Goods that were produced and were not sold. And principally, it has a direct tie to the capacity to purchase, effective demand. You know, so if you don't have the money, or the value of what you have is not enough, if you were buying so much before, you would reduce your consumption rate, and that will reflect on your purchases, you know. So if what is the need in producing so much if the purchasing power is low? So the truth of the matter is from March to December, the CBN had given itself a calendar, you know, of possible accomplishments in the area of inflationary figures, you know. Also addressing the fact of inflation anchor expectation anchor is also important, because it will get to a stage if we allow inflation. For instance, this is 31.7 in February. If it goes to 33, for instance, in March, and goes to 34 in April, the expectation will be that prices will continue to increase. And therefore, you now have sellers of products and services just arbitrarily increase prices. And at that level, you have a pricing crisis. No CBN, no banker, central banker would want to allow such situation. So if this is the minimum it can do in terms of policy deployment to address, of course, and salvage that movement, that is appropriate, you know. The CBN also talked about insecurity. It's not as if the CBN, because when you read the communique, you realize that the CBN acknowledges all these other challenges on the fiscal side. So which means that the CBN was properly informed, you know, on the position it needed to take given the information and the data available to it.
So which means that there is collaboration between
It's
the physical
clearly everything Prof itemized here are itemized in that communique. So it was not, that decision, the MPI was not arrived at based on any form of misinformation.
They were well aware
ignorance
or inadequate
yes.
information.
So they were properly aware of it. And of course, going forward, we can't possibly arrogate ourselves, to ourselves, having the kind of access to data that the CBN has. So for the CBN to take that decision, it must have been based on appropriate analysis of the data before it.
Okay.
So, but my own concern is that I go to markets and I see how prices have been moving, and this should be a concern for households. And when households are starting, agitated around pricing, the concerned authority must come into play. So if this is the minimum the CBN can do, without, of course, reverting to what we used to have, where the CBN wants to solve every problem. If this is the policy, the tool they can use, please let us allow them to use it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief Akichiju, for your submission there. It's okay. Okay, Prof, let's look at the what the CBN intends to do. The CBN yesterday hinted that the law enforcement agencies are looking for forest backlog that is not verified. What are your thoughts on this? Should this be their focus now, or it should be on something else?
Well,
because there is so much stability now, and everybody is happy that there's stability in the forex market, and we're even hoping that the naira will further appreciate, in times to come.
Yes.
So what do you
think?
Of
course, I said earlier that part of that stability has come about because of the ability of the central bank to clear, this forex forwards, forex, backlogs, and of course before June, okay, or rather as of June, before the unification of exchange rates, I think the forex backlogs, the figure was close to 7 billion. All right, but you don't, of course, you won't come in and start paying, everybody. You would want to know the ones that are genuine. Okay, the CBN found that some of them were not even backed by, they didn't have naira backing. Some of them didn't meet the requirements.
Some of them
were not genuine. Okay, so CBN engaged, I think Deloitte, a consulting firm, and before then, to remember, the government also engaged, a special investigator. So the special investigator ascertained, a value that it considered, it said was valid. The consultant that was engaged by the central bank also did this work and also came up with, the value of transactions that they said were valid. So it's the total of the valid transactions that the central bank, of course, we understand has now cleared. But we also understand that some of them are still being, contended. Okay. They are still contentious. Okay, so you would expect the central bank to, of course, continue to ensure that those ones are verified. Settled, okay. Yes, before they can pay. So I want to agree that that's a step in the right direction, involving even security agencies to investigate, particularly the invalid ones. Okay, and the extent to which they are even criminal transactions are involved. So it's a good thing to involve security agencies to address the invalid ones. And again, I've read that there are also some people that are also making claims that they have not been settled, that theirs is valid. So it is for the central bank to use consultants, to verify all this. So I think that's part of what the central bank is doing to inject, confidence, in the market. It's a good one.
The CBN also announced that there is a new foreign exchange mechanism which will involve legislation. When do you think this is likely to come to light?
Foreign exchange mechanism, I am not too sure of what you mean now. I know that I think on January 26th, the FMDQ, issued a market notice on the, with respect to updating, their methodology, methodology for NAFEM rates. That took effect on January, 29. So from time to time, you expect the FMDQ, to revise, their methodology. I'm not too sure that requires any, legislative backing, because once they revise, FMDQ is licensed by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So once they revise, of course, they are the ones in charge of the NAFEM. Okay, once they revise the rates, come into force.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. But I want to also, say something here. You see, I'm yet to read the communique. Of course, it's not. Of course, it's not yet out. Talking about their personal statements, but if you go by the personal statements of members, the 12 members in the last, the one before the last February MPC, personal statements. Okay, before we used to think that all of them voted for 400 basis points for that in that February. It was a unanimous until the personal statements now came out. So when their personal statements came out and I went through that, I realized that some members also voted for rates below 400. Okay, as a matter of fact, one member actually voted for 100 basis points, which was the the position I took at the time. All right, that yes, you need to tighten, but in tightening you have to consider other factors. And if you read the personal statement of that member that voted for 100 basis points, quite detailed, and so on. It was only the CBN governor during that meeting that voted for 425 basis points, increase, because at that time he had suggested the rates be moved from 18.75 to 23%. Okay, so that is to tell you that when I sit here and talk about the need to balance, they need to also have regard to a growth. For example, I am not alone. That there's even a member or some members who also have that. Of
course, it is expected that yes. All the members will not have the same view
yes.
on a particular.
Yes. So I'm delighted to find that such. Exactly. Okay. He also made a point. My friend made a point. You see, the fiscal side, is churning out a number of programs. The Renewed Hope Infrastructure Fund is one of them. Agric Fund is another. Consumer credit is also there. Student loan is there. Yes. So these are programs,
and also efforts to fight insecurity.
Yes. No, but none of the programs. Programs that are meant to, stimulate the economy. Okay. Meant to improve access to credit. So if the fiscal side is doing that, the monetary side is doing things that will tend to constrain credit. Don't you see some divergence?
Okay.
So I think that the monetary authority, should be seen to also be working towards, aligning with what the fiscal side, is doing. The policy should be supportive of the fiscal side. Okay, that's why I talked about synergy. It's not as though of course there's a representation in the MPC, but I just gave you an example of what I mean by divergence. When the two are churning out different growth targets, central bank has a growth target that's different from that of the fiscal side.
Must they have the same growth target?
That is what I'm saying. That for us, for the
because that's the question.
Yes, it's because it's one economy. It's one economy. Okay. It's just like saying that do you know what inflation rate today target that the central bank has? Central bank governor says he wants to drive 21.4. It is the one in the budget, 21.4% for 2024. Okay, so that tells you, with respect to inflation, that the two are in agreement. They want to see inflation come down to 24.4% by the end of the year. But for growth targets too, okay, these are macro indicators, macro targets, growth target too should be the same. So the government can have 3.76. Central bank is having 3.38. Okay.
But the disparity is not too...
No, it is.
Yeah,
in terms of GDP, yes, in terms of GDP growth rate. Yes. So all I'm saying is that what the central bank is doing in terms of tightening is okay. Okay, is in line with their mandate, primary mandate of price stability. But that's price stability. Remember, the three prices, whether it's interest rates, inflation, and exchange rate. I also understand that under the policy trilemma, central bank monetary policy trilemma is not practically feasible. Okay. It's not feasible for the central bank to achieve low interest rates, low inflation, and low exchange rates. They call it policy trilemma. Okay, so for inflation rate to come down, according to theory, interest rate must go up. But that's speaking to demand side inflation. And I've just told you now that given the nature of our economy, we have a peculiar case. You see, across the world now, in the US, in Europe, the US Central Bank held rates, Fed, okay? The European Central Bank is also holding rates at 5.25%. Okay, the same with the US. Their target rates for both of them is 2%. And if you've been following MPC meetings across the world, you will notice that most of them now, Sri Lanka, Switzerland, they're all reducing rates. All right. So, but that's understandable, and that's because inflation rates in these economies, inflation rates are moderating, unlike our own case where inflation rate is rising. But again, if you disaggregate that inflation component, in our own case, okay, we have majorly food. He mentioned it. Food inflation is about 38%, 37.9%. Okay, when headline inflation is 31.7. So, and what is driving food inflation? Okay, it's not the demand thing. What is driving food inflation is a cost push. In my view, yes, I agree. Central bank has data at its disposal, but that data too should speak to an anecdotal evidence. That the factors too that they mentioned, insecurity, food shortages, which they also mentioned in the communique.
Okay, Professor.
So the best way to address this kind of inflation is to boost, food output.
Okay, the best way to address is to boost food output. So we'll just pause you there because our director is calling for a break. Now we'll take a break. The conversation continues. Stay with us.
In the latest MPC, CBN MPC committee meeting, and the outcome of that committee meeting with Niyi Akishiju and Professor Waleke. But let me get to Niyi. Prof keeps talking about the other side, and that other side includes, for instance, SMEs that now face, heightened difficulty in being able to access financing, which SMEs play a very crucial role in the economy. So how is it possible, for instance, to get this side ticking also, so that, because the ordinary Nigerian, as far as we are concerned, when we all this MPC and MPR and all that, doesn't matter to the common man. What matters to the common man is that you go to the market and you can
be able to purchase.
You buy at a rate that you consider reasonable.
That's my concern. that had been the peg of my argument.
But then we haven't reached. We are not there, and it doesn't look like we're getting there.
We are getting there. We just talked about movement in the forex markets. We're getting there. We talked about the fact that movements in the forex markets have a way of passing through the economy onto domestic prices. And that is one. The second one is, if we're talking about MPR, the increment of MPR, it is a deliberate policy of slowing down growth. It is not decided as a growth booster by the CBN. It's actually a policy to say, let us slow down this possibility of growth through constricting demand. and that as you constrict demand, it would circularly impact price, and price would move down. And when price is reduced, it reflects in the value of the money either in your account or in your pocket. And when it reflects in the value of the money in your account or your pocket, it enhances the demand capacity, effectiveness demand of that money in your pocket. That's the whole universe of the NPR, as it were. So the concern is no longer troubling, because we can see, even if it is perceptibly, we can see that movement. And yes, it is easy to also compare what is happening in our jurisdiction with the US and European, very structured, developed economies. But I try as much as possible to compare with our peers. We share the same monetary and fiscal trajectory with Egypt, especially if you start tracking it from 2016. In 2015, 2016 especially, we had the same issues around recession, and this Egypt went the route of IMF, and we decided to also do our own restructuring, economic restructuring and all that. At the point in time, they abandoned their own. We had the economic recovery program then. So what I'm trying to say, now again, Egypt had gone back to what we are doing, though now compelled by the IMF. And it increased its NPR by 6% in January. When we increased ours by 4%. And we are seeing more activity. The other aspect of that is that Egypt even had interventionists. UAE provided $24 billion cash. We didn't have that. We were actually doing cap in hand to Afrexim Bank to give us a swap, a deal swap of $3.something billion. So Egypt had 24 billion. UAE intervention. IMF also promised them 8 billion. And of course, IMF is not even about the money. It is about a license. It's like granting you a license to go around the world, and that you have a guarantor, so you can have access to debt, to loan as much as possible. What I'm trying to say essentially is that we see peers in Africa facing the same kind of challenge we are facing. And doing extreme things. We are not doing extreme things. Doing extreme things in the reality of the fact that, one, our economy is still developing. We should accept that. We have, our last budget is still under $35 billion. It's not exactly a huge economy, So it needs a lot of calibration in a way that the private sector needs to be incentivized. Yes, it's likely says, we are talking of private sector that you are constricting. But again, private sector flourishes in a situation where there's huge effective demand and purchases. So therefore, where in that environment, the people, the consumers, either at the level of household consumption or industrial consumption, cannot have enough value, cannot create value for the money they have to purchase, it becomes a disincentive to producers. So the issue is, you have low NPR, you can access loans, you can access credits, and you can produce. You are producing for whom? And you have now done your production. The consumers are finding it difficult to buy. What is the purpose of that production? Talking about small and medium scale entrepreneurs in Nigeria, do we have a history of commercial banks actually funding MSMEs in Nigeria? So sometimes when we also talk about the NPR, we need also to properly stratify it, because in truth, until recent time, when you have the fintechs, come into the scene, and you can, on the app, secure certain sum of money and all that, but at what cost too? Because you are talking of about 40, sometimes 50%. So that again, it's a talk for another time.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Chief, for your thoughts there. You have listened to Chief, and you want to react to...
Yes. You see, people often say the credit to the private sector is usually low, and therefore any hike in MPR may not have any significant impact on access to credit for SM. But that's again a wrong notion, and that's because even the informal sector, people in the informal sector are also watching. Okay, if I'm going to give you a loan today, I'm also going to take into cognizance the fact that interest rates are going up. So even cooperative societies too will be basing their credit facility on benchmarking on the MPR. Okay. A lot of loans today, even in the informal sector, are benchmarked on the MPR. They tell you MPR plus 3 or MPR plus 5%. So once MPR moves up, it goes up. So it doesn't have to be the one that coming from the banks. Okay, and even with respect to banks, today what you find is that banks will quickly write their customers, repricing their loans, automatically, and you find that transmitting, all through, the economy. Okay, yes. You see, I also want to respond. Yes, peer countries. Yes, I cited Egypt. Egypt started a program in 2016, just as I mentioned. In November 2016, okay, Egypt floated the Egyptian pounds. Okay, so following an IMF advice. At that time, I recall, Egypt got $3 billion, the first tranche of a $12 billion program, they entered with the IMF. Now, the question is, since 2016, I've been following the story of Egypt. Since 2016 up till now, okay, I go and check, has Egypt recovered? Okay, at the time they did that, $1 was 8 Egyptian dollar. $1 was 8 Egyptian pound.
Okay. All
right. So as soon as that was done, it moved to 19 Egyptian pound. Today, what is the exchange rate? You have 40 Egyptian pound, 39 Egyptian pounds to $1. Okay. If you look at the inflation rate trajectory, the same story. So, in spite of all that they did, trying to follow the IMF this thing, okay, they are still where they are today. Today, what they're doing now is to they have resorted to asset sell. The $24 billion, said UAE gave, it was in exchange for Egypt sold their land, a city, entire city, to UAE. Okay, so that's what they're doing now to be able to recover, in spite of the assistance they're even getting from IMF and the rest of them. So it's not about moving the MPR by their policy rate by 6%. Okay, even if you use that as you want to make that comparison, the question is, what about the other policy parameters? What is Egypt's cash reserve requirement? Egypt's cash reserve requirement, if you check South Africa cash reserve requirement is 2.5%. In Egypt, I think it's about 4.3. Egypt, Kenya, in that range. In Nigeria, what's our cash reserve requirement? 45%. You know what cash reserve requirement is? Sterilized, bank deposits. Okay, so you raise cash reserve requirements by as high as 45%. Okay, you know that what that does to ability of banks to make credit. Okay, that of Ghana, for example, is 15%. The highest I've seen is Turkey, 25%. So ours is unduly high, at 45%. So you are looking at the whole, basket.
Okay.
You have a relatively high MPR policy rate. You also have high CRR. And the CRR, what has it done now? Okay, if you notice, in recent time, the standing lending window of the central bank is now pressured. Banks are now going to borrow money from the central bank. Okay, so, and look at it now. Central bank has raised MPR 24.75%. the standing lending rate is actually 24.75 plus 1%, which is the corridor. So that's 25.75%. So the banks are now going to borrow at 25.75%. Okay, and central bank has also by the last meeting is also encouraging them to also come and pack funds with them, and that's why they narrowed the corridor again to -3. So if they put funds with the central bank, they get about 21.75%.
Okay.
So again, that's encouraging. You want to suck out liquidity, by all means at all costs. I'm not against that. What I'm saying is they should also resort to other tools,
okay,
like the OMO, for example.
Okay.
Because if you use MPR, if over-rely on MPR, it has this, it has a tendency to distort a lot of things, in the economy. That's my point.
Okay.
There are other tools the central bank can use to further, tighten monetary policy outside of the MPR. Yes.
Okay, let's look at the pattern of international trade. How is it impacting on Nigeria's forex and economy in general? Because there have been change in pattern of international trade. How do you think it's impacting on our economy?
We talk about international trade. The question is, what do we exchange with the rest of the world?
Okay.
It's basically, unfortunately, we remain a monoproduct economy. It's basically crude oil. Okay, and that's also why you find that over 90% of our forex, comes from crude oil sales. Mm-hmm. So, speaking to the need to diversify, I know it's a medium to long-term thing, and I'm saying a high interest rate environment will not encourage diversification, because you're talking of production. You have to produce to be able to exchange. Okay, yes, people argue monetary policies are short-term, fiscal. These ones are medium to long-term. I agree, but you need to at least begin to put that environment, in place that will, encourage productive activity. Okay, the way it is going now, we are saying up to the end of the year, rates will be high up to the end of the year, but you end up to discovering that it may exceed 1 year. Yes, it's usually difficult to define what is short term and what is medium term. It's usually difficult when you say in the short term this will happen. What is that short term? Okay, that in the medium to long term it will be fine. What is that medium to long term? Is in the long run we are all dead. Okay, that's why if you're also making decision, okay, with the short term, also have recourse to what is also possible on the fiscal side within that time frame.
Okay.
Because this idea of saying let's get hold of rates, let's force down inflation, and then you see that sequence may not work that way, and I'm saying it may not work that way because of the structural rigidities we have in the economy. We have a peculiar economy where, as I said earlier on, as I argued earlier on, supply side factors, cost push factors are dominant or tend to dominate even the what we refer to as monetary factors. Somebody may disagree and say central bank has superior data. Yes, I'm not contesting that the central bank has superior data, but there is also a fact, okay, that the supply side factors, cost push factors, are significant when it comes to inflation drivers in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, and that's somebody that our prof is talking about is you, actually. Somebody may argue that. But then, while liquidity issues are a global issue, would you really say in the final analysis, because we are pretty much running out of time, in the final analysis that CBN has found a potent way of dealing with liquidity issues in Nigeria?
Well, it's not a single channel. MPR is one of the channels. You have the open market operations. It could still, of course, address issues of inflation rates with the same CRR that we're talking about. Create a balance in terms of availability of funds for banks, for commercial banks to engage in trading by not moving the MPR, but by moving downwards the CRR. I think, as a matter of fact, that the CRR is high. and that there should be a balance, actually. But that is the extent to which I consider that. But the MPR rate, I think it's potent enough, because a major.
But do you still see the NPR rates going higher than that?
No, it moves with inflation figures.
With the inflation figure.
If the inflation figure tomorrow moves by 2%, if it moves downward by 2%, there's likelihood that the NPR would move downward by a certain marginal percentage, under 1% or by 1%. You know. So it's most likely, because it's inflation targeting. The desire of the CBN is to say, okay, it is 31.7, headline inflation is 31.7 in February. Is it possible for it to move down with what we have done in the next 60 days or in the next 90 days, a quarter, to move down to 29? If you achieve just 29, 2% reduction, inflation is a major milestone movement. You know.
So you are optimistic that we're likely to hit that 21% inflation rate by December this year?
Targeting. 21.4. Targeting. All things being equal, MPR, CRR, fiscal, agriculture, and all that, more likely move it to that level.
What other factors are you
talking that's
about?
The point. Other factors, and he said, you know, when you say something, you say ceteris paribus. You know, somebody said in Nigeria, ceteris is never paribus. It's difficult. That means holding all that.
They never come down.
Exactly.
That's a challenge.
Yeah. So you see, my advice is their next meeting in May is affords them an opportunity to at least observe the impact of what they have done so far. You know, the impact on the economy. So I wouldn't be expecting them to, continue to, hike rates. If inflation continues to move up, for example, up till April, that should tell them that perhaps, the solution, the silver bullet is not in raising NPR. They need to look at change approach, change strategy.
Okay. Well, that is. That's how far we can go on today's discussion. Victor?
Yeah, I think that's it. I would like to thank Chief Niyi Akinshiju for coming on the program today, investment financial analyst on the program, and Professor Uche Waleke, Professor of Stock Market, Nasarawa State University, Kefi. We thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the program. And that's the much we can take on today's episode of the program. Good Morning Nigeria returns same time tomorrow. I am Victor Azo, thanking you for watching.
And I am Ademola Adeoye. We appreciate your company. Join us tomorrow for another episode. Enjoy your day.